Welcome, everyone. Please take a seat. I'll just see if there's anyone. 1 minute. Okay. Here's the spray if you need the microphone. Okay, welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. I will hand over to our moderator for today, Victoria Williams.
Hello. This is Metric Matters, just in case any of you are not quite in the right place. We are going to be looking at how to measure the impacts of integrated food and climate policies, a practical discussion, and I'd like to introduce Deputy Mayor of Marseille, Aisha Sif, who will be giving the opening statement. Aisha is the Deputy Mayor of Marseille, which is the leading city on sustainability, and she's in charge of urban agriculture, sustainable food, and the protection of farmland. Thank you, Aisha.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. Thank you for your invitation. It's an honor for me to participate in this forum. I would like to greet in particular Mrs. Ada Colau, the Mayor of Barcelona, for her invitation and her deputies, and thank you for the organization of this 7th forum. As Deputy Mayor of Marseille in charge of sustainable food and the preservation of agricultural land, I therefore welcome to the collaborative initiative of cities around the food transition favorable to both climate and social justice. They will allow us to progress quickly and obtain greater support for the states. The municipal majority of Marseille has the will to ensure quality food to all the inhabitants of the city. Marseille has conducted a great deal of research, often in the context of international and cooperation about the evaluation of sustainable development policies. And my colleague, Jean-Charles Lardic, is our expert on these issues and will be able to tell you exactly about evaluation today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in December 15 at Paris City Hall, at the end of the COP21, Michael Bloomberg closed the Mayors Climate Summit with the following sentence: "What is not measurable is not manageable." This terrible phrase reveals the spirit of the Paris Agreement and the obsession with measuring the greenhouse gas emission reductions. This intention was translated into the famous NDCs by the states. However, working on what is measurable induces public policies towards what is easily measurable. That means actions related to technology and equipment. This leaves aside what is on the human side: changes in behavior, societal transition, food transition. It doesn't lead to systemic cross-cutting policies whose effects are necessarily diffuse and more difficult to evaluate. So, integrated municipal food policies are affected by this difficulty. Moreover, the Paris Agreement is curiously silent on the contribution of food policies to the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions. It is indeed much easier to calculate the fossil energy consumptions saved by a solar collector than by a communication campaign on food waste. The result is a lack of recognition of one of the main contributions that cities can bring to the fight against climate changes and its effects. This difficulty can deprive cities of subsidies based on a precise calculation of the carbon footprint of their policies. However, as we all know here, as the Glasgow Declaration insists upon, local sustainable food policies not only benefit to the climate, they also bring many co-benefits with regard to all the sustainable development goals. Fight against poverty and discrimination and inequality, social links, health, biodiversity, and so on. A photovoltaic collector produces few social links, except maybe between the shareholders of a company. A photovoltaic collector does not strengthen the fight against discrimination. It hardly contributes to biodiversity. On the opposite, shared gardens do all that. The Sustainable Development Goals should be taken into account in international climate negotiations and even lead to allow a financial bonus to policies that also contribute to address various societal problems. So we must come together to Glasgow to ensure that this reality is recognized and that the means are provided to support our systemic policies. Our difficulties in accounting for the benefits of our food policies, which is the subject of today, must be heard. We must also highlight our contribution to the overall resilience of our territories, which goes far beyond the simple reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that we expect. And disease must be adapted accordingly. States must finance our food policies in the same ways as energy saving in our buildings. They must involve cities in the elaboration of regulations that often block the creativity of our territories. It's that we call legal transition. States must listen to our demands for clarification of a multi-actor and multi-level governance of food. They must facilitate the societal transitions that we advocate. The Glasgow Declaration deals with all these subjects. That's why the Marseille City Council has adopted it, and our presence here and soon in Glasgow shows that we support it. This being said, while waiting to be heard by the states, we must try to quantify the benefits of our sustainable food policies. As we said, it's a very difficult task. The reductions in greenhouse gases induced by our cross-cutting policies, our day-to-day communications, and so on, have lasting effects, but they are diffuse, progressive, and difficult to predict. On the other hand, if we develop these evaluation mechanisms, we must extend them to all sustainable development and human development objectives. So, as Ms. Aisha said, we are ready to exchange in this subject and put our experience and above all our desire, and put together our experience and above all our desire to progress at the service of a city that wish to collaborate on this subject. In the meantime, we are looking forward to hearing the testimonies that will follow and that will contribute to the progress of this complex issue in the spirit of a Glasgow Declaration on Food and Climate. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. So the housekeeping and order of the session. We have got 4 wonderful speakers this morning, And they will be doing a 3-minute presentation, and then we will have a panel session, and then from the panel session we will have breakout groups where you will have the opportunity to think about the things that have been said through the panel and to discuss the kind of issues that you have in your areas. So my name's Victoria Williams. I'm the director of an organisation called Food Matters, and Food Matters is also part of the Sustainable Food Places Network in the UK. The Sustainable Food Places Network has over 50 towns, cities, regions and municipalities that are working on food partnerships and developing food strategies. And we have a wonderful network of organisations that are doing some really innovative things in the UK. And we're here today to talk about measuring progress on food and climate change. In a few weeks' time, as we've already been heard today, global leaders will be meeting in Glasgow in Scotland for the COP26 to share how far they've come on climate targets and specifically what they're committed to doing for the next 5 years to reduce carbon emissions that threaten all our futures. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that we're all worried about food and farming, and that it hasn't featured highly on the COP26, despite food and farming being responsible for around a third of global emissions. At COP26, our global leaders need to hear and see that change is both possible and welcome. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank our colleagues at Nourish Scotland and IPES for the immense amount of work they've put into bringing this together at the Food and Climate Declaration, and for organising this event. Many global cities have now signed up. Those collective voices need to be heard and to get food and farming on the agenda and to keep it there. So that's about high-level declarations and statements of intent. But I want us to slightly put that aside this morning. Our session is about detail of implementation, and we're going to hear about that from our speakers. How can we make tangible progress with reducing food-related greenhouse gas emissions? How can we measure it? How can we interpret this? Make it simple and make sense for practitioners and local authorities. I always try and keep in mind a dinner lady, someone who's making school meals, thinking that at that level. So how can we make this change happen at pace and at scale? We need to measure and report on this to build momentum and let our leaders know about that. So we need to focus on the big things. Measurable action is needed on key areas where we can make a real difference. So around sustainable diets, less and better meat, more plant-based, sustainable land use. How can we ensure that farmers make the transition to more ecological food production? Localised supply chains, climate and nature-friendly food procurement. And underpinning it all, how do we reduce food waste to ensure that all the good work that we do around food production doesn't all go in the bin? So these are the 5 key themes of the Sustainable Food Places Toolkit that has been recently launched. And it's about helping local authorities and municipalities to take action and how to measure the results of what they are doing. And the idea is to bring that information together in one place so that we build the momentum and build the kind of base of metrics. So that toolkit is available, but don't ask me about it. Ask it about the toolkit, which is available, but you can find more information about that through the conveners of this session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have Frauke Idema from the Eid municipality in the Netherlands. We have who is the program manager, where she is responsible for integrated food policy at both regional and local level. We have Franco Latour, project manager at Rosario Paroma on our online community, which I think is behind me. And Franco works in the city of Rome, and the Storio is an in-house company there, and his area of expertise includes governance and capacity building, strategic planning and sustainable urban development. We have Sarah Hargreaves, again, one of our online contributors. She's a senior consultant at Resource Futures, and Sarah led the food waste area of excellence in the Bristol City's successful bid to achieve the Sustainable Food Places Gold status. And I did read that bid, and it was fantastic. And we also have Jess Halliday, who is in the audience, in the room today, and she is an associate of RUAF, the Global Partnership on Sustainable Urban Agriculture and Food Systems. And before working in RUAF, she was involved with the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food to author a report on the driver of urban food policies. So that's our speakers, and I would like to start with each of the speakers is going to give us a 3-minute presentation, and then we will have questions, questions that I will be asking, and then we will have questions from the floor and from our online panelists, audience, sorry. So I'm going to hand straight over to Fauke to kick us off. So welcome and thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And Kat, Franco, and Kathleen, well, nice to see you. At least I don't see you now, but nice to be also here. I'm Frau Kiedema from the Netherlands, and I'll try to tell you something about the city of Ede, a middle-sized city, and our practical solutions for measuring food policy in progress. So let me take you to Ede. It's a middle-sized city, as I told you, in Food Valley region in the Netherlands, where rural and urban meet, where we have a strong agri-food cultural sector, and it's on the other hand a city where many people live, eat, work, etc. Ede has an integrated food policy, as you can see. You see the one picture over there. And, well, that's a very conscious choice we've made. The goal of that food policy is a healthy and sustainable food for all our citizens, taking into account the entire food system. So focus not only on health or environment, the whole of it, as you can see, 6 categories. Because of that, we have a tailor-made monitor, an own food dashboard. It's a mixture of already existing indicators and data from our reach, for example, new indicators we made ourselves, and indicators from the monitoring framework from the Milan Pact, from the categories governance, sustainable diets, and food supply distribution. Very helpful indeed. Let's say we try to understand what's going on in our food policy because we want to have a complete overview. It's a support for our food policy, and it's also accessible. What you can see is accessible for all our citizens, so they can see what's going on. However, we get information about our results. We can go to the next slide, please. Part of our food policy is, as I said, healthy people. And because of that, we do quite a lot about food education. Focus point for us is primary schools, youth, because, we do believe they need a good start in their life. And, second, of course, is secondary school, but that's later on. We have a kind of toolkit made in all those 6 years we've had a food policy till now. And the toolkit contains, as you can see, healthy school lunch, school garden, tiny food forest, and healthy school certificates, kind of label for doing good behavior at school, combination between parents and teachers. To be honest, we measure results till now. We measure the number of school gardens, for example. We measure the number of schools with a healthy certificate. In 2020, so not so long ago, due to several circumstances, we decided we should give priority to school, and the main aspect for our policy should be focus on the impact of, are we doing the right things now at school? We do quite a lot, but what is exactly the good thing to do? How do we make real difference? How do we get that impact? We do need clear and measurable numbers on costs and benefits, so we can make good choices then. On our request, we decided to have a new research, very new, specific for the context of Ede. benefits and costs from food education in Ede itself. And we did research to the impact from measures on overweight, mental health and education levels. A good perspective. As you can see on the slide, we have some first results, but to be honest, it's a very, very new report. I just got it last week, and I did a first, well, let's say, first interpretation, and that's it. So I don't know quite a lot about it, but what I do know is we have some first results, and that tells us about our own toolkit, that 3 measures we've been taken till now are, well, relatively cheap to be taken. It doesn't cost a lot for a community like a city as Ede. But, well, does it also give a lot of benefit? When we focus on school lunch, for example, the question with that one is, are we earning back the high societal costs? Does it give enough positive impact? Well, that's a good question. We don't know yet. But about the food forest, benefits minus costs, well, that looks very positive, but of course you have to see it in a contextualized situation. We don't know yet. But just to give you an idea how we as a middle-sized city try to, well, get some numbers on impact. How we have to determine, finally, is, well, we don't know how we should interpret them for our city yet. And once we've done that, of course, we have to give it also political significance, because, well, we will have elections next year, and, well, every measure costs a lot of money from our community. So what is the thing to choose in the future? For now, I think, well, it's wise to say that, well, because my story, I give you an impression of how a middle-sized city, only a middle-sized city, tries to do its best to find its way in coming up with clear measurable numbers and find some impact on, for a very, well, important subject for us, education for children at school about food. So we're dealing with this in this specific way with this issue, and we are very much looking forward to share ideas about it, because, well, I think altogether we know so much more about it. Finally, last remark, I'm really happy to be here, and I would like to say thank you to the co-organization, to the organizers, to have me invited over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know it's a short amount of time, and I think, you know, you touch on the point of everything's expensive, so how do you decide what you're going to measure? I'd like to now hand over to one of our online speakers, Franco. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. If you'd like to take it away.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to provide my little contribution to this such very important forum. So Roma is well known as the city of Fontana di Trevi, St. Peter, the Colosseum, but Roma is also among the largest agricultural municipalities in Europe, and is the largest in Italy. Just to provide you with some pitch numbers, the agricultural surface in the municipality of Rome is around 58,000 hectares. It's around 40% of the total surface of the municipality, that is around 130,000 hectares. On this surface, there are 2,656 agricultural farms. And in the last period, 10 years, there was an increasing of the number of agricultural farms of around 40%. And an increasing on the surface devoted to agriculture that increased of more than 12%. So this is a different picture of a city that is well known for its cultural, architectural, historical legacy, but what maybe the majority of European doesn't know is the characteristic of an agricultural city. Just to provide you with some more numbers, there are more than 3,200 plots of urban gardens. Most of them are managed by associations, not by single citizens. And there are more than 200 associations involved in the management of the urban gardens in the city of Rome. This is the picture, the general framework. What's the relation between the city of Rome and the food policy? The main reason, I stress again, is because Roma is an agricultural city. So the food policy of Rome has been proposed around 2 years ago by a group of citizens, academics, organizations, farmers, NGOs, who asked the municipality to approve a food policy. And to do this, during these 2 years, a promoting committee has been established, made by the promoters of the food policy, who write down a document that has been addressed to the Roma institutions. First of all, the municipal assembly, the municipal council. And the municipal council took note of this, opening the discussion within the local institution, the environmental committee, the agricultural committee, within the city assembly. And on April 27th of this year, 2022, the municipal assembly approved the food policy of Rome. What are the main objectives of this food policy? They are 10. The access to the resources, the sustainable agriculture and biodiversity, the short supply chains and the local markets, the town-country relations, the food and the territory, waste and redistribution, the multifunctionalities of the farms, the issue of awareness of citizens, landscape, and last but not least, planning for resilience. This food policy approved on last April has not been yet implemented. The reason is that just yesterday we have elected the new mayor and the new municipal council. So it will be their first, we hope, task to reopen the file, the decision that has been already made, and go to the implementation of this food policy. What are the weakness and the excellence that the food policy focused on? The weakness is the land consumption, and the excellence are the school canteens.
1 minute.
And I would like just to finish, just to list the number of criteria that the promoting committee of the food policy has proposed to the municipality to start the reflection on how to measure the impact of the food policy of Rome. Governance is the main criteria, then sustainability, then empowerment, social inclusion, effectiveness, cost benefits, participation, and awareness and the responsibility. This is the starting point for measuring the impact of the food policy of Rome. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Franco. I appreciate it. It's a small amount of time to try and get across such a complicated issue. I'm going to go straight to Sarah Hargreaves, who again is one of our online speakers. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi everyone. Again, it's really great to be invited to speak today. Just to introduce Bristol quickly, we are a city with 200,000 households, and we're currently collecting 48,000 tons of food waste. Our stats show at the moment that we're wasting 3% less food than the UK national average, so we're in a really good position. And we're also recycling 20% more avoidable food than the national average. So things have been going well. We have a highly diverse population. There's a big mix of cultures in Bristol, and that's something that we need to embrace in all of our food work. And from a processing point of view, primarily all of our food waste is going to a very local anaerobic digestion plant, just on the city outskirts. From Bristol's point of view, we started strategic work to address food waste very early on. We were very early adopters of food waste collections and restricted residual to try and boost the engagement with those collections. And that was back in 2006. We now have a very strong food currency in Bristol, and we have food covered in our One City plan, and it's also mentioned in our climate emergency plan and ecological emergency plan. So we continually seek to embed it further into the fabric of the city. We achieved our Sustainable Food Place Status Silver Award in 2017, and as was mentioned, we have just recently achieved Gold, which is a great success. This was a collective ambition to make Bristol's food system better, and we wanted that to be better for the people and for the city and for the planet. So we looked at reducing food waste across the board, using a very collaborative process. We wanted to increase access to healthy food, people growing their own, cooking for health and well-being. We also wanted to encourage and support as much community action around food as possible, especially because of that cultural diversity within the city, and also striving for food equality wherever that's available. And we have a very strong redistribution sector. We also were looking at encouraging dynamic procurement processes and finding ways to encourage and support local suppliers. A lot of that came about through systemic change. So how do we influence policy, regulations, and even licensing? So we have things like the Bristol Eating Better Award, which includes areas on food waste and food procurement that people have to achieve in order to get a license to work within the city around food. So we're trying to embed it as deep as possible. After we achieved our gold, we're now looking to continue to build a diverse and inclusive, resilient and flourishing food community. And we want to make real change by 2030. So we still have the Bristol Bites Back Better campaign, which is looking to grow this good food movement. Our next steps are going to be looking at developing a food equality strategy and a Bristol 2030 Good Food Action Plan. So I think that's my 3 minutes, so I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being so on time. Fantastic. I'm just going to ask Jess, one of our other panelists, to come and join me. And we're now going to have a series of questions that have been put to the that were gathered before the session began, and then we will hopefully. We are running a little behind, but hopefully we might have time for a couple of questions from our online audience. First question, really, I'm going to ask Jess. Given your report writing in terms of thinking about what we can and can't measure, how do you think areas should think about deciding what aspects of their strategy they might be able to measure?
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think in terms of low-hanging fruit. Oh, a bit closer. Is that better? Okay. In terms of low-hanging fruit, well, what we at RUAF focus on is things like health, sustainability, resilience. Even if we can't help directly on things like CO2 emissions reduction, but there are ways of being able to measure around health if you can connect the dots. And often that is a matter actually of considering monitoring as a journey, and rather than looking at actions you already have decided and working out how to monitor them as a in retrospect, but actually thinking about monitoring from the very beginning, even actually before you've determined the actions. So as part of visioning, even before you're writing the strategy, what do you actually want to achieve? What's the common vision? What's the end point? And how do you want to be working towards that end point so that you've got certain landmarks on the journey? And then as you're defining the actions towards achieving that, to be working looking at how you can monitor those actions to determine whether they're successful or not.
Thank you. Franco, can I ask you the same question? How did you decide, given the complexity of the food system in Rome, how did you decide what aspects of the strategy you were going to measure?
The decision has not been already made. As I try to explain, we change the institutions at the local level. We have just elected the new mayor and the new municipal assembly. So it's their task now. What I try to explain with the list of possible objectives from one side and from the other side, the criteria, is what the promoting committee has proposed to the municipality. The same persons that have written down the document of the food policy that has been approved by the municipal council. So the main criteria is the issue of governance. This is the most important. Also because within the food policy approved by the city of Rome, there are also the implementation tools. The Food Council, the devoted offices and departments that will support the implementation of the food policy. So I believe that the criteria and the indicators will be one of the first tasks of the Food Council when it will be in the next period be established. Of course, on the other side, the promoting committee is discussing this. And because the promoting committee will be part of the Food Council, I believe that the priority of how is governed the process of the food policy will remain the priority of the food policy of the city of Rome.
Thank you. And the same question to you, Frauke. Given that in your presentation you said, the cost of all these interventions and how you manage that against thinking about what you're going to measure going forward.
Yes, so the same question. Well, as I said, I think 3 reasons, to be honest. First, as I said, both our City Council and Food Council told us we need to focus on youth. And nice to say is that on the 16th of October, well, we had a World Food Day in the Netherlands. Main focus point was also the youth. So there's a very positive attention for the importance of, growing up very healthy. As well as in the Netherlands as in my city. Second, and I think that's a more urgent one, is that we know, maybe due to COVID as well, we have a lot of overweight on young age. So there's a reason, there's a real urgency to do something about it in time. And third, and I think that's an important one, on a local level, what I see, and I see that in other Dutch cities as well, is that there starts to be more interest in the evidence-based food policy, evidence-based. Not only doing something and measuring activities and results, but focus on impact. And well, that's quite a challenge for, well, let's say the middle-sized cities amongst us. And well, that's it, 3 reasons.
Thank you. It's complicated and decision making.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. The next question that came up, I'm going to ask to you, Sarah, thinking about going through the gold food process, thinking about how did you develop the right objectives and targets to base your monitoring evaluation on?
So Targets are obviously super important, but with Bristol having started their food waste journey many years ago, we'd already addressed the low-hanging fruit, and obviously introducing food waste collections and reduced residual. That's an easy modelling exercise to work out, okay, what's the impact going to be? What can we set targets against that? The situation we found ourselves in for our Going for Gold bid was much less predictable. We have a multi-diverse community, and it's less obvious what is going to trigger changes in behaviour. And so around that, it becomes very difficult to set concrete quantitative targets. So the approach we took was to take a more qualitative approach and to focus on collaboration. How much can we bring the city together? By doing that, we brought all the key stakeholders into one room. That enabled us to collect a wide range of regular data points so we could track the direction of travel and then proactively address issues as they arose. And just to put this in context, I'm obviously speaking from a food waste specifically point of view rather than food generally in Bristol, which is obviously a bigger picture. But yeah, that collaborative piece worked really well for us and helped us continually push food waste down, which is a complicated thing to do because there are a number of different touch points. So having everybody in the room based on the health sector, the university sector, the waste processing plant, the household collections, business networks, and the council very strongly on board, and the redistribution sector, having everybody in the same room, we could talk about what have we achieved so far, where we are at the moment, what's coming up in the future. We could share knowledge and we could share regular data points and learnings. And that really helped us in a qualitative way push food waste continually down. And it's more of a kind of pilot and measure system that we're using. So actually we decided quantitative targets from a food waste point of view had less value, and just heading downwards and reducing our food waste through increasing collaboration was the best way to approach it.
That's really fascinating. The unpredictability of these things and what we want to collect data on, what we can, are often different. So I'm just wondering, Jess, in your research, what kind of data can we collect, and who is responsible for doing this, and how can we do it?
Thanks. Well, on data collection, I think the key point Froke has really already mentioned, that it's important to see what data is already being collected, and also at what level. Is it being collected at the city level, at the regional level, and is it possible to disaggregate that data so that you can actually use it? If there are existing surveys that are happening in the city around households, for example, can you bolt on a question that will actually meet your monitoring needs? And it's really important, I think, to mobilize people across different departments, across different organizations. So it's really a collaborative effort to be getting data from various different sources, because, as Froke said, cost is really important, and collecting new data does cost a fortune. So really, I think it's quite a pragmatic focus what resources you do have on the data that isn't available anywhere else. So there needs to be really a mapping process to see who's already collecting what, and then you need to fill the gaps in.
Thank you. That's great. So given that, Froke, what challenges have you faced, and what challenges do you think you face in the future in terms of monitoring process, given all those kind of complications and the financial?
Well, which one won't I? Well, I think too many. Well, let's pick only two. Well, first one is, as I told you, we asked for a kind of new research tailor-made for the specific situation of aid and schools in the Netherlands. We don't have a school lunch as a part of school normally in the Netherlands. So I think it's a challenge for us in the Netherlands. How could we scale these results up for other cities? How could we make it interesting for other cities? And well, somewhere later on these days, I will say something about a city deal, kind of combination of Dutch cities working together to scale up, to share information. Well, that's a challenge for us because of the specific situation in a Dutch city. a second one, and well, I told you I will tell you a very practical story. Well, that is, to be simple, the city council. Yes, you said the same. It's all about money. I mean, well, we did a kind of new research. We tried to use other information, but well, we really have to explain to a city council this is important. Yes, we have to invest. We really should invest in things like this, even for a middle-sized city, 100,000 people, something like that. And of course, we try to do it in a very intelligent way, work together with national government, things like that. But still, it's a very, well, let's say, rough discussion about it in the Netherlands. So we might some help. We need some help, maybe.
Thank you. Sarah, come back to you. Given what you've just told us about the sort of the slightly chaotic nature of trying to get people in the same room together, and thinking about the gold bid and all the work that you did to bring all that data together, I'm thinking about whether you've got any particular successes in terms of monitoring the impact of the food activities in that process.
Yes, and to follow on from the previous speaker, having the municipality on board is critical, and we are in a really strong position in Bristol that we've been working around food for so long now, that it is backed by all the key sectors really within the city, and especially Bristol City Council. So we're in a really unusual position here now where we have an annual waste composition analysis that is run across household food. So we can see constantly every year how are things changing. And that data point allows us to measure not just whether the food waste is reducing, but equally if the black bag waste is increasing and what the avoidable and unavoidable split is. Also, is there an increase in packaged food or takeaway food going in? So it really helps us be quite dynamic in the messaging. Bristol Waste Company did an amazing campaign to boost behaviours to increase usage of the recycling bins. And that had a really big impact. They measured that through a more cost-effective method through just measuring tonnages in a pilot area. And they could see over a period that it had a huge impact. This was the Slim My Waste campaign in encouraging people to actually put food into the recycling bin. So it's getting that normative behaviour. Everyone's doing this. Let's all put our food in the right bin. So after rolling that out across the city, we saw a huge increase in food recycling tonnages, and that has stabilized. So we've retained that increase in engagement. But then with our waste composition data, we were able to see, but actually, yes, we've got wonderful new food waste going in, but there's a creep up of avoidable food, and that's something we want to avoid. So that extra data point allowed us to then redefine some campaign messages to look at, okay, so let's look at waste nothing, let's look at other activities that will help people understand that they need to reduce the waste in the first place. So how can they eat all of the foods and really reduce things that way? So if you can get the municipality on board and you can get that financial backing to have the really detailed granular data of a waste composition analysis every year, it gives you a lot more ability, especially where we're at now, having covered our low-hanging fruits and being in this difficult position of knowing where the touch points are going to be. That waste comp data really helps us understand where we can have best impact and where we can create the best nudges. And it will also tell us which demographics in the city are best to target.
So just a quick follow-up to that, because I think it's interesting in terms of the finances. Do you think, given the data that you are collecting, that the local government, your municipality in Bristol, is more likely to continue funding that data collection because they are getting useful information from it? Or what do you think the kind of issues are in terms of keeping that money coming in so that you can carry on collecting that data?
We have an interesting setup in Bristol. So the City Council has a tackle company, an arm's reach company, that does all the food waste and all our waste and recycling collections. So primarily they are organising the annual waste composition analysis. This year the City Council did another one. So I think that there's enough understanding there across the city of the value of these, and I've seen no indication that they're looking to stop doing them. They've been running for a few years now, and the data is really invaluable.
Great, thank you so much for that. There's one more question that I have. Franco, you said earlier that it's now up to the local municipality to decide. What help do you think they need to make decisions about what they're going to monitor and evaluate?
The problem is not data, is not analysis, because given the characteristic of the city of Rome, this is the capital city of Italy, there are a lot of academic institutions, research centers devoted to analyze the issue related to agriculture and food. So there is no need for more data, maybe a more deep analysis. What is really needed are rooms. I'm joking. We cannot put all the stakeholders in one room. 2,600 farms? How could we give voice? The issue is democracy. 33 farmers market, 200 and more of associations that are managing the urban gardens. This is the point. On the other side, there are the so-called excellences. So every day, every single day, 145,000 of school children get the food provided by the municipality. On this respect, Roma has a certificate for excellence in Italy. The school canteen is a very well-known and, let's say, respected system. So at the point that Roma is considered a model of quality in this. The issue, I continue and stress, the main issue as the indicators, let's say the criteria was governance and the indicators related. The issue is how to guarantee to the process that will monitor, evaluate, assess, and of course, revise the food policy in the next years. How can we guarantee a full democratic process to all the stakeholders involved? This, I believe, will be the first issue to be discussed.
Thank you. I think that's absolutely right. And I just want to ask the same question to Jess, really, given that the complexity, the myriad of stakeholders, in your experience, what are the tools and support that can help that process?
Gosh, well, it's a big question. I'm going to be talking at the end of the session actually about the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Monitoring Framework Handbook and Resource Pack. Franco has already mentioned it. And in fact, one of the work streams is governance, so there is a set of indicators on governance. So I think that's quite a good starting point for cities that really want to be making sure their governance structures and mechanisms are as democratic as possible. Of course, it's adaptable to different places, different circumstances, and so we would always recommend that cities look at the indicators and see how relevant they are. In terms of what else is needed by cities, I'm actually really listening quite carefully to hear what cities as part of the session today see as missing from the various frameworks that are already available. RUAF has been working on indicators for a long time, particularly my colleague Joy Carey. I like to call her the indicator queen. I'm not sure she knows that. She's probably blushing behind her computer. Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing piece of work and very complicated, and it's something that we at RUAF will be continuing to work on and trying to respond to what's needed.
Thank you, Jess. I think we have a few minutes that we can take some questions from the floor and from perhaps our online
In the
community.
meantime, I do recommend this book, this booklet. This is the monitoring framework. And, well, it's really, as Jess said, it's very, very useful. It's very good work.
Thank you for highlighting that. Do we have any questions in the room? Oh. Would you like to say who you are and where you're from?
Sure. I'm Anja Hultberg from Copenhagen Municipality. So I have two questions, one for Jess, but I think primarily. So are there any cities working on trying to find indicators on how to mitigate climate emissions from private consumption? Because we are currently looking in our public public procurement, and that's quite easy because it's within our own system, but how to sort of work on the whole city level. So that's my first question. And the second one is for Sarah. When it comes to, we're also trying to sort of measure our food waste from the public system, which is really hard. We do it on the private, on the consumption throughout the city. But I'd also be really interested to know if there's any sort of methods and ways of measuring public food waste.
So on emissions, not that I'm aware of, the work that RUF has done has been, particularly for the monitoring framework, has been based around the streams of the monitoring framework. So that sort of emissions we haven't handled up to this point, but I expect that there may be some other frameworks out there that can better speak to that.
Sarah, have you got any thoughts on the second question?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take public as commercial food waste. I don't know if that's correct, but we certainly do have interesting challenges collecting data on commercial food waste. We know that a huge chunk of it goes to our local anaerobic digestion plant, and because they sit on our food waste action group, they are able to give us the tonnages, and we can understand what volume is coming in, and we know that's representative of a very large majority of the city's businesses. But there's other waste going outside of the city that we can't, it's harder to track, and obviously there's commercial confidentiality around these waste companies and sharing that data. What our local plant was able to do was put together a template for us of how data could be shared from a processing plant in an anonymized way that would not have such an issue from a confidentiality point of view, and would hopefully then encourage other people to share data points with us. It worked to an extent, but it still is a very difficult area to collect data from. And it's also interesting to maybe talk about redistribution data here, because again, that's a very competitive and confidential area. People don't want to share too much data around that because they're competing for the same sections of food. But we found by setting up a redistribution group and bringing those people together and actually helping them work together to maximize activity, again, the data points became a lot easier to access.
Thank you for that. Do we have any online questions? No? Any more questions from the floor?
Good morning. Thank you very much for all these very interesting interventions. My name is Marcin Bono from the URBAC program. I had a very quick question for Frauke related to learning and exchange with other cities, especially in relation to measurement of your food policies. I understand the situation is pretty specific in the Netherlands, but it seems to be pretty similar to that of Belgium as well, as far as I know. So I was wondering whether you had thought of teaming up at least with the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium to exchange and potentially using European funding for that or without it. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Well, let's say I think we have a difference in countries regarding school lunches. For example, we know from Ghent that they have school lunches provided by government. As I understood, in the Netherlands we don't have it at all. At any school we don't have school lunches. That's
That depends on the cities. In Belgium, many schools,
okay then.
Many
Okay.
schools don't have lunches. That's why I'm saying it.
It's even more than a specific situation. So I think that might be a bit difficult to compare. But when we talk about monitoring integrated food policy and all the other aspects of food education, which is even more interesting, I suppose, well, I think we should be able to compare and to share information as we are going to do on national level in the Netherlands. I really would like to scale up, well, first results from that report. We could do the same, yes, indeed, when we talk about food education, as it has so many aspects in it. So yes, I'm really interested. But I have to warn you, it's very new research. We really have to give meaning to it. We have to give significance to it. And, well, we'll see. I'm looking forward.
Thank you. That's the thing, we have to keep doing things that we know are working, even if we can't measure it, and learn how to measure as we go. There was another question. Would you like to, if you introduce yourself first?
Okay. Good morning to everyone. My name is Andrea Calori from ESTA Milan. We are an independent research group. I would like to have the opinion of the different speakers about the real use of indicators and data in policies. Our experience, we provided scientific support for the city of Milan for the past 6 years in the food policy, and we did the first kind of analysis in 2014, which was mainly to set the scene, I think. Then a second analysis in 2018 with huge dimension, with a lot of data, very, very hard to be. And then we had, and we are having now also different experiences in other cities. And my opinion is that there are a lot of knowledge embedded in this kind of activities, which is mainly in the mind of the consultant. And one problem is why we are doing this. Because if a city has school canteens or not have the full school canteens, typically they have data, or not, although they have data. And this is the same for all the sectors. Then the quality of data can be different, we know. But data indicators are something to manage the daily life of the officers. And sometimes we are trying to do different things, so to combine elements, to understand the system, which is not the sum of the sectors. So I would like to know your opinion about the barriers and the obstacles to move from this kind of approach in which most part of the knowledge is inside the consultant, and how to use food as a way to have more sustainable cities. I have a long dialogue with my friends of RUAF since the beginning of the city region food system. And we know that indicators are a way to discuss with people. So there is a matter of also of democracy, for sure. But sometimes this... So I would like to know your experience. Are we succeeding in pushing the knowledge inside the municipalities to have food as a way, as a driver for sustainability?
So I understand what you're saying. So does it all the knowledge sit with consultants, or how do we empower and skill up municipalities to take action? Which panelists would like to respond to that? Jess or Sarah, I'm thinking. I'm going to hand the mic to Jess, and then if Sarah, if you've got anything you want to...
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrea. Yeah, how to get the knowledge out of the consultants' heads. I think part of it is about the assessment methodology. If you've got a really rigorous framework, then the important information should be coming out of the consultant's head and into their report. It should be being captured as part of the process. So I would say make sure it's built into the methodology. And I was really struck also by Ada, the transparent platform that everybody can see, that citizens can access. So establishing a platform, some kind of visible way that the consultant can be feeding their learning into something for everyone to access, and then it does continue to stimulate these conversations.
Sarah, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? I will. Yeah, I'll come to you.
Yeah, definitely. From a municipality point of view, we don't need to encourage them to consider food as a critical part of the climate conversation, but getting other people to engage with it is important, of course. And one way that we found, whenever we go to do a talk, you find the same people in the room, and it's trying to engage different people and getting them to understand why it's important. So we developed a little hypothetical to try and get offices to understand why food waste might be relevant to them, because they're not food waste generally associated organizations. So we calculated, well, if everyone in an office threw away a banana skin and had 2 cups of tea, so that's 2 tea bags, what does that scale up to across the city over a year? And then what does that scale up to across the UK? And how does that compare then to households and hospitality and retail? And by doing that, you're helping people really understand how they fit into the problem when they may not actually consider it to be part of their remit. You know, I'm an accountant, I have no interest in food, I have no relevance to food. But actually you do, you're playing a really important part, and potentially having double the impact of retail sector. I mean, it's only a hypothetical calculation, but it's trying to put things in ways that people can then relate to it, and then it has a connection with them. We also actually found, if I've got another minute, during COVID, there was an instinct to stop doing the work because people were in a crisis mode during the first lockdown, and was it sensitive to keep talking around messaging around don't waste your food. But actually it provided us with a really interesting opportunity to help people understand why we talk about love food, hate waste type messages, because we could suddenly put it in the context of key workers and emergency supply. So it's really important that you don't waste your food, because there's not a lot of food around at the moment. It's really important that you're supporting the key workers and you're supporting these retailers. And it's also really important that you eat all the food that you're purchasing, because you need to support the waste collectors to make sure they can continue those collections and not have to stop any. So it allowed us to change our framing slightly, and again, hopefully had a really good resonance and made people start to reconnect with food in a different way. So I think that's the critical point of consultants, to try and get people on board by explaining the situation in ways that they can understand it best.
I think that's the nub of it, getting people to understand at their own level how they fit into the picture. One last comment from Frauke.
Yes, Andrea, well, thank you for the question. First, a compliment, because I know your report quite well and helped us to make all our older men to understand that food is also their responsibility. One of the pictures in your report, you know that one. Okay. Well, you didn't ask a question just on, well, I think you did on purpose, because maybe you have doubts. Well, are we succeeding? Well, maybe as Sarah said, due to COVID, I think there's a growing need to, both on local and national level, at least in the Netherlands, to do something about health in this case, and to get measurable numbers. And on local level, we know that we have to make choices. We have to make choices in the huge toolkit we have on measures and activities we have been doing now for years. So we have to make choices, and that's why there's a growing need for, well, numbers, for data, etc., to be interpreted on local level then.
Great, thank you so much to all our panelists. Absolutely wonderful. We are now going to have a slightly shorter session, and Sophie's going to introduce that for us. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Yeah, so we'll move to, thanks to the speakers, I'm just trying to get this organized. We'll move to the more interactive part of the session, and I think after this panel, which has been really dynamic and super interesting, it'll be great to start hearing from all of you in the room as well. We've got the speakers, and Moderator will kindly join myself and Charlotte here as facilitators in the room. For people who are joining us online, a link will be posted in the chat to go to another Zoom room where you can join a discussion group there. We'll have facilitators online who'll take you through that, and then at 10:45 we'll all reconvene. So we've got around 20 minutes in our discussion groups, and your facilitators will know the questions to guide you through. We do only have, for in the room, so for online participants, feel free to move to the Zoom room, and we'll meet back here. For people in this room, we have 5 facilitators and 6 tables. So if I could ask people maybe at this table, which has only 2 people, if we can join other ones, that would be excellent. And then I'll hand over to the facilitators the questions that we will go through on the screen. We won't be reporting back to the main session just because of the hybrid setup, but we will be producing a small report after this meeting that summarizes the key points to come out of your discussion. So thank you so much.
Words from Jess Halliday, just to sum up, but yeah, sorry to have to cut your conversation short.
Great, thank you, Victoria. This has been such a good session. So many good ideas and perspectives from different cities using different kinds of ways of monitoring and evaluating. Just to sum up, I think the importance of indicators is really clear. The importance just can't be overstated. Ideally, it's needed from the beginning, setting a baseline, making indicators and evaluation part of the entire journey, planning, implementation, and tracking. Indicators allow you to see whether something's going wrong, whether an action is delivering the expected results. They can also really mobilize people towards a common goal. And I was struck by Fruka's account of the visible, accessible platform for all citizens to be able to monitor the food strategy implementation. And they really show the efficacy of actions to justify continued support, like when a new government comes in, as in the case of Rome. Also to other cities that are looking at implementing the same or similar kinds of actions. With lots of case studies that I've done, we very often find no monitoring at all. The Food Action Cities website, foodactioncities.org, which we run with GAIN, Milan, Pact, and RUAF, there is a big gap in terms of being able to show the results. So it's work that is truly essential. Tomorrow will be the official launch of the handbook and resource pack of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact monitoring framework. So Freika kindly shared earlier the monitoring framework itself, which was launched 2 years ago in Montpellier. These new resources actually take cities step by step how to use this monitoring framework. So there's practical steps, methodology, tools for cities to adopt and implement their own monitoring framework that's adapted to their context. And this has been based on the results of a piloting process over 7 months in Quito, Nairobi, and Antananarivo. So we hope that this will be really useful for other cities. And it's important to see there are lots of different frameworks out there. It's important to see that they are distinct but related. And in fact, the Milan framework has 44 indicators. It's kind of a subset of a larger set of indicators originally developed by Joy Carey and the late Marielle Doubling at RUAF for the City Region Food Systems programme, which has 210 indicators, actually. And the current phase of the City Region Food System programme, we're also developing indicators specifically looking at resilience to climate shocks and stresses and to pandemic impacts. So I almost wish I had a slide with a Venn diagram to show how they're interconnected. But I think for cities, the important thing is there are tools available. These tools are evolving. They're moving in different directions. And we want to hear what you need, what's not currently covered, and how we can help. Because as I mentioned, RUAF and particularly Joy, we've worked for a long time on indicators. And this is work we continue to do. So if you can, please do join us tomorrow afternoon at, I think it's 4:45, for the launch in the big room, Tools for Tracking Food Systems Transformation. So I shall leave it there, and thank you very much, everybody, for a good session.
So I'd just like to close by thanking you all for being here, our online audience. It's been a wonderful event. thank all our wonderful speakers and MUFPP for hosting the event. As Jess says, there are lots of tools available, and you can find out more information from the organisers of this event. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here, whether it's just today or for the rest of the conference. Thank you.
I believe we probably have to give some space for the organisers to set up for the next event taking place in here. So apologies to sort of rush people slightly on. But thank you so much for joining the session. And just a very quick note that the write-up from the session will be available at glasgowdeclaration.org. But we will make that available on the through the organisers of the conference as well. So see you all later, and thank you so much.